The notification lit up my phone at 2:47 on a Wednesday afternoon while I was elbow-deep in a transmission rebuild. Oil under my nails, radio playing something I wasn't listening to, the kind of ordinary moment that becomes a bookmark in your life. I wiped my hands on a shop rag and glanced at the screen expecting a grocery list or a reminder about parent-teacher night. Instead, I got 8 words that rewired my entire existence. Can't wait till David's gone this weekend, baby. The message sat there like a grenade with the pin half pulled. My wife's name glowed at the top. My chest went tight in a way that had nothing to do with the heat in the garage. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I read it 3 times before my brain would accept what my eyes already knew. The words didn't change. They just sat there, permanent as a tattoo you regret at sunrise. I checked the contact again to make sure some cosmic glitch hadn't crossed wires. Nope. Jessica. My Jessica. 17 years of marriage, 2 mortgages, a joint checking account, and a son who still thinks we hung the moon together. The garage suddenly felt smaller, like the walls had moved in while I wasn't watching. My phone buzzed again. This time with purpose. Incoming call. Jessica. I stared at her photo on the screen, the one from our anniversary dinner last year where her smile looked like it cost nothing. My thumb hovered over the green button while my pulse hammered in my ears like a drum with no rhythm. I let it ring once more, then answered with a voice I pulled from somewhere steadier than I felt. Hey, I said, calm as lake water, smooth as a man who hadn't just read his own ending. Her breath came fast on the other end, sharp and panicked like she'd been running. David, oh my God, David, I need you to delete that text right now. Her voice had an edge I'd never heard before, high and thin like wire pulled too tight. I leaned against the workbench and let the silence do some work. People in their 40s know this trick. When someone's scrambling, you give them rope. Delete what text? I asked, and I could almost hear her heart stop through the phone. She tried to recover, stumbling over syllables like furniture in the dark. The one I just sent. It was meant for my sister. About a surprise. For you. This weekend. The lie arrived in pieces, hastily assembled, no instruction manual. I nodded even though she couldn't see me. A surprise, I repeated, flat as Nebraska. That's sweet. She exhaled too hard, relief trying to shove fear out of the way. Yes. So just delete it, okay? Don't ruin it. I looked down at the text again, those 8 words still glowing like brake lights in fog. Sure thing, I said. I'll delete it. Another pause, this one hers. She was measuring me, trying to gauge if the ground was still solid. You at the shop? She asked, voice smoothing out now, trying to sound wifely and normal. Yeah. Finishing up a job. Be home around 6. We traded pleasantries about dinner and whether Ben needed a ride to practice. The conversation felt like play acting in a language we both used to speak fluently. When she hung up, I set the phone down and stared at the Craftsman calendar on the wall. Someone had circled this weekend in red. Anniversary getaway, it said in her handwriting. Romantic cabin upstate. Just us. The text stayed on my screen like evidence at a crime scene. I didn't delete it. I screenshot it instead, sent it to my email with a subject line that just said Wednesday, and then archived the original. Men who've been married long enough learn that proof matters more than feelings. Feelings lie. Screenshots don't. I wiped my hands again even though they were already clean and walked to the small office at the back of the shop. My business partner, Luis, looked up from invoices with the kind of face that knows something shifted. You good, man? He asked. I nodded and poured coffee from the pot that had been sitting since breakfast. Just need a minute. He didn't push. We'd known each other since trade school, back when we thought rebuilt carburetors and cold beer solved everything. He knew when to let a man sit with his thoughts. I opened my laptop and logged into our phone account. If she sent one text to the wrong person, maybe there were others. The bill detailed everything: numbers called, times, durations. I scrolled back 3 months and started seeing patterns I'd been too busy to notice. Late-night calls to a number not saved in my contacts. Texts sent at hours when she said she was asleep. A name surfaced in my search, cross-referenced from her social media tags. Garrett. Fitness trainer at the gym she joined 6 months ago when she said she needed to feel like herself again. I remembered encouraging her, proud even, telling friends my wife was getting healthy. Turns out she was getting something else entirely. I sat back and let the weight of it settle. There's a specific kind of tired that comes from realizing you've been working overtime to pay for a life that wasn't real. I wasn't angry yet. Anger takes energy. I was hollow, like someone had scooped out my insides and left the shell standing. The shop radio played an old Springsteen song about thunder roads and dreams. I turned it off. The silence felt more honest. That night at dinner, Jessica moved around the kitchen like everything was choreography she'd practiced. Pasta, garlic bread, the salad she makes with cranberries, and that cheese I can never pronounce. Ben talked about soccer tryouts and whether he should go for midfielder or stay in defense. I listened and responded at the right moments, but part of me was watching her. The way she checked her phone face down on the counter. The way she smiled too much when the conversation lagged. The way she touched my shoulder when she passed behind my chair, a little too deliberate, like she was marking territory she wasn't sure she still owned. "This weekend's going to be great," she said, pouring wine I didn't ask for. "Just the two of us. No interruptions." I raised my glass and met her eyes. They looked clear, almost convinced by her own performance. "Can't wait," I said, and watched her shoulders drop half an inch with relief. After Ben went upstairs to game with his friends, she curled up next to me on the couch, closer than she'd been in months. Her head on my shoulder, her hand on my chest, the kind of proximity that used to mean home. Now it felt like reconnaissance. She was checking my temperature, making sure the text hadn't detonated anything she couldn't control. I stroked her hair and felt like a man petting a dog that might bite. "You seem tense," she said softly. "Rough day at the shop?" I shook my head. "Just tired. Transmission job took longer than expected." She made a sympathetic sound and squeezed my hand. We sat there pretending to watch a show neither of us cared about until she yawned and said she was heading up. I told her I'd be there soon, just wanted to catch the news. When her footsteps faded upstairs, I pulled out my phone and looked at that text again. "Can't wait till David's gone this weekend, baby." The cabin reservation was real. I'd booked it myself 2 months ago, spent money we didn't have to prove I still knew how to be romantic. She'd acted so excited, talking about hikes and late breakfasts and reconnecting. Now I understood. She wasn't planning to reconnect with me. She was planning to ghost me. The weekend was cover. While I thought we were healing, she was scheduling her own escape route. I opened a new note on my phone and started a list. Simple, methodical, the way I approach any big job. Step 1, confirm who Garrett is. Step 2, figure out how deep this goes. Step 3, decide what I'm willing to lose. I stared at that third line for a long time. In marriages that span decades, you accumulate more than stuff. You build routines, inside jokes, a shared history that can't be divided like furniture. You also build a kid who thinks his parents are a unit. Breaking that feels like demolition work on a house you built with your own hands. But foundation cracks don't heal by ignoring them. They just spread until the whole structure leans. I added a fourth step. Protect Ben. Whatever happens, he doesn't become collateral damage. I clicked the phone off and sat in the blue glow of the muted television, feeling older than my 43 years. Somewhere upstairs, my wife was probably texting the man she'd mistaken me for. And somewhere inside me, a decision was forming, slow and certain as rust on unprotected steel. The next morning, I woke early and did what men my age do when the world tilts. I went to work. The shop opened at 7, and I was there by 6:30, pulling the heavy garage doors up and letting the cool April air chase out yesterday's oil smell. Luis showed up with coffee in those paper cups that burn your hand if you hold them wrong. He set one on my workbench and didn't ask questions, which is why we've stayed partners for 12 years. Some things you know without asking. I spent the morning rebuilding a carburetor for a '72 Chevy, the kind of work that requires focus and rewards precision. My hands knew what to do even when my head was somewhere else. By noon, I'd made a decision that felt less like revenge and more like carpentry. If I was going to confront this, I needed the full picture. Assumptions ruin good men. Facts keep them standing. I texted an old buddy from the service, Connor, who'd gone into private security after his knees gave out. He owed me for a timing belt job I did off the books when his wife's van died during tax season. I kept the message simple. Need discreet help. Can you call? He rang back in under 5 minutes. We met for lunch at a diner off Route 9 where the booths are high-backed and the waitresses don't hover. He slid into the seat across from me looking like every other guy pushing 50, gray at the temples, handshake still firm, eyes that miss nothing. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I told him what I needed without dramatics. Confirmation. Locations. Patterns. He nodded and pulled out a small notepad, old school, no apps to subpoena later. You sure you want to know? He asked, the kind of question friends ask when they care. I already know, I said. I just need to be able to prove I'm not crazy. He tapped his pen twice. Give me 3 days. At home that evening, Jessica was in full performance mode. She'd made pot roast, the kind that takes all day and fills the house with the smell of effort. She wore an apron I bought her as a joke 5 Christmases ago that said Queen of the Kitchen. The table was set with cloth napkins, the good ones we save for company. Ben noticed too. What's the occasion? He asked, dropping his backpack by the door. No occasion, she said brightly, too brightly, like a lamp with a bulb too strong. Just felt like cooking. We sat and ate and talked about nothing important, the kind of small talk that greases family life. She laughed at Ben's impression of his history teacher. She complimented the coleslaw I'd picked up from the deli. She asked about my day with genuine seeming interest, and I gave her the sanitized version. A rebuild, an oil change, Luis burning his hand on an exhaust manifold. Normal shop talk for a normal evening in a normal house where nothing was normal anymore. After dinner, she suggested a walk, just the two of us. Ben was fine with it, already plugging into his gaming headset before we hit the driveway. We walked our neighborhood loop, the one we've done 1,000 times, past the Hendersons' place with the yard gnomes in the corner where the Johnsons still haven't fixed their mailbox after the snowplow clipped it in February. She held my hand, her palm warm and familiar. I'm really excited about this weekend, she said as we passed under a streetlight that flickered like it couldn't decide. I feel like we haven't been us in a while. I squeezed her hand and chose my words carefully. What does us look like to you? She glanced up, surprised by the question. I don't know. Connected, I guess. Like we're on the same team. The irony landed on me like a weight. We're on the same team, I said, testing the sentence in my mouth. It tasted like rust. Of course we are, she said, and kissed my cheek. We're always on the same team. That night I lay awake listening to her breathe beside me, that slow rhythm that used to be a lullaby. Now it sounded like a countdown. My phone sat on the nightstand, screen dark, holding a secret she thought I'd deleted. In the ceiling shadows, I replayed our 17 years like a highlight reel. The wedding in her parents' backyard, the honeymoon in Charleston where it rained every day and we didn't care, the night Ben was born and I cried harder than she did. The fights about money and the fights about nothing. The makeups that felt like starting over. We'd weathered job losses, family funerals, a cancer scare that turned out to be benign but aged us both. I thought we were building something that could hold weight. Now I wondered if I'd been building alone while she planned the exit. Around 2 in the morning, her phone buzzed on her nightstand. She stirred, reached for it in the dark, and I watched through barely open eyes as the screen lit her face. A small smile touched her lips, the kind you don't control, the kind that tells on you. She typed something quick and set it down, then rolled toward me and draped her arm across my chest like we were still fine. I lay there under the weight of her and felt lonelier than I ever had sleeping alone. Connor called Friday afternoon while I was rotating tires on a Subaru that should have been retired 3 owners ago. I stepped outside into the parking lot where the sun was doing that thing it does in late spring, bright but not warm enough yet. "Got what you need," Connor said without preamble. "Your wife's been seeing this guy Garrett for at least 4 months. Gym sessions turned into coffee, coffee turned into lunch, lunch turned into afternoons at his apartment on Maple Street." My stomach clenched but my voice stayed level. "How often?" "Twice a week, sometimes 3. Tuesdays and Thursdays regular. Fridays when you work late." I closed my eyes and saw her calendar on the fridge. Tuesdays were her book club. Thursdays she volunteered at the library. Fridays she said she was having dinner with her college roommate. I'd believed all of it because why wouldn't I, anything else? I asked. Connor hesitated, the kind of pause that means what comes next will hurt. "This weekend. She's got a reservation at the Clearwater and under her maiden name." "Same place you booked, different name." "She canceled your cabin reservation yesterday afternoon." The ground shifted under my boots. I leaned against the Subaru and felt the tire rubber still warm under my palm. "You sure?" I pulled the confirmation email. Checked in with the front desk. She called them, said there was a family emergency, got a full refund. "The Clearwater booking is for 2 guests, check in tomorrow at 3. I thanked him and asked what I owed. He said we were square and to call if I needed anything else. When the line went dead, I stood in the parking lot watching clouds move across the sky like they had somewhere to be. Everything clicked into place with the ugly clarity of hindsight. The excited planning, the new lingerie I'd noticed in the laundry, the way she'd been cheerful all week like someone who'd just solved a problem. She thought she was smart. She thought the accidental text was contained. She had no idea I'd been building my own case, quiet and careful as a man who knows how to fix things built to last. I drove home that evening with my hands steady on the wheel and my mind working through scenarios like I was planning a rebuild. Confront her now or let her walk into her own trap. The temptation to blow it up immediately was strong, the way your hand wants to slam a door that's been left open in the wind. But men who've made it past 40 know that satisfaction fades faster than the damage it causes. I wanted more than a fight. I wanted her to see herself clearly, the way I was seeing her now. At dinner, she was radiant. Hair done, makeup subtle, the kind of glow that comes from anticipation. She'd made salmon, my favorite, with roasted vegetables and that lemon butter sauce she knows I love. Ben asked why we were eating fancy on a Friday. "Your dad and I are going away tomorrow," she said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "Thought we'd celebrate early." Ben grinned, the kind of grin that still has braces and believes his parents are solid. "Nice. Where you going?" "Little cabin upstate," I said, watching her face. "Supposed to be real quiet this time of year." She nodded, smile perfect, eyes steady. "Can't wait." After Ben headed to his room, she cleaned the kitchen with the kind of energy people have when they're running out the clock. I sat at the table pretending to scroll through my phone, actually reviewing Connor's report one more time. Locations, times, license plates. Everything documented, everything true. She came up behind me and wrapped her arms around my shoulders. "I love you," she said into my neck. The words landed like coins in a fountain, hopeful and weightless. "Love you too," I said, and felt the sentence carry 2 meanings she'd never hear. That night she packed for both of us, folding clothes into the same duffel we've taken on every trip since Ben was born. I watched from the doorway as she tucked in my flannel shirt, the one I wear when the mornings are cold. "Don't forget your boots," she said. "In case we do that trail you mentioned." I nodded and added them to the pile. The performance was so complete I almost admired it. Almost. She zipped the bag with a smile that said everything was exactly as it should be. In bed, she curled close, her head on my chest, her breathing evening out into sleep faster than usual. Relief does that. She thought the hard part was over. She thought the text was forgotten, the weekend secure, the plan intact. I stared at the ceiling fan turning slow circles in the dark and thought about all the ways a foundation cracks before it collapses. Small fissures you ignore. Weight distributed wrong. Corners cut when no one's watching. By morning, the house would still be standing. But we'd both know which walls were load-bearing and which ones were just for show. I set my alarm for 6 and closed my eyes, not to sleep, but to steady myself for the kind of work that doesn't come with a manual. Somewhere in the dark, her phone buzzed. She didn't stir. But I heard it, a small sound in the quiet, like a timer counting down to the moment when pretending stops and truth does the only thing it knows how. It tells itself. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of sunshine that makes you forget it's still technically spring. Jessica was up early, humming in the kitchen, packing snacks for a trip she wasn't taking with me. I came downstairs showered and dressed in my weekend casual, jeans and a Henley she'd bought me last Christmas. "Coffee's ready," she said, kissing my cheek with the kind of ease that 17 years builds or fakes. I couldn't tell anymore. We loaded the duffel into her SUV because she'd insisted on driving. "You work too hard," she'd said. "Let me handle it." I didn't argue. I just climbed into the passenger seat and watched her check her mirrors with the precision of someone who'd mapped this route a dozen times in her head. Ben had slept over at a friend's house, so the goodbye was a text. "Have fun, don't do anything weird," with a skull emoji. Kid humor. It made me smile despite the weight in my chest. We pulled out of the driveway at 9:10, right on schedule. Her schedule. She drove north on Route 9, chatting about the weather and a podcast she'd been listening to about cold cases and bad marriages. The irony wasn't lost on me. I nodded at the right moments and watched the scenery roll past, farms giving way to forest, small towns with antique stores and diners that looked like they'd been there since Eisenhower. Around 40 minutes in, my phone rang. Connor. I'd asked him to call at this exact time. "Hey man," I answered, putting it on speaker. "What's up?" His voice came through clear and serious. "David, sorry to bother you on your weekend, but we got a situation at the shop. That engine rebuild for the Daniels truck, the one we promised by Monday, the parts supplier sent the wrong pistons." Jessica glanced over, her smile tightening just a fraction. I sighed, heavy and frustrated, the way a man does when work interrupts life. "Are you serious right now?" "Dead serious. I got the supplier on the line, but they're saying they can't get the right ones here until Tuesday. Daniels is going to lose his mind. He needs that truck for a job Monday morning." I rubbed my face, playing the part. "Can Luis handle it?" "He's trying, but you know how Daniels is. He wants to talk to you. Says he won't deal with anyone else." Jessica's hands tightened on the wheel. I could see her jaw working, the calculations running behind her eyes. I let the silence stretch, let her think I was considering what any responsible business owner would do. "I have to turn around," I said finally, looking at her with the kind of apology she'd been giving me for months. "Jess, I'm so sorry. This is exactly what we were trying to avoid." Her face did something complicated, a mixture of relief and panic and frustration all wrestling for control. "Can it wait? We're already halfway there. If it was anyone else, yeah. But Daniels brings us a lot of work. If I blow him off, he'll take his business to Tucker's shop, and we can't afford that right now." I reached over and squeezed her knee, the gesture familiar and bitter. "You go ahead. Enjoy the cabin. I'll wrap this up as fast as I can and drive up tonight. Tomorrow morning at the latest." She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "David, this is supposed to be our weekend." "I know. And it will be. I just need a few hours. The cabin's paid for. No sense wasting it." You can get settled, relax, and I'll be there before you know it. Her mind was spinning, I could see it. This wasn't the plan, but it was close enough. Better, even. She'd have the afternoon free. Her eyes flicked to the road, then back to me. Are you sure? Positive. I'll make it up to you. I promise. The word promise hung in the air between us like a bad smell. She nodded slowly, her smile returning, smaller now but there. Okay. But you better not take too long. Scout's honor, I said, and held up 3 fingers. She took the next exit and turned the SUV around, heading back toward home with a speed that suggested relief more than disappointment. We didn't talk much on the return trip. She fiddled with the radio, landed on a station playing soft rock that sounded like a dentist's office. I stared out the window and thought about the difference between a lie and a strategy. One is cowardice. The other is carpentry. When we pulled into the driveway, I grabbed my duffel and leaned in to kiss her goodbye. She held my face for a moment, her eyes searching mine like she was looking for cracks in the foundation. I love you, she said. Even when work gets in the way. Love you too, I replied, and stepped back. Text me when you get there. She nodded, already reaching for her phone as I closed the door. I stood in the driveway and watched her pull away, the SUV disappearing around the corner toward a weekend she thought was hers. When the street went quiet, I pulled out my own phone and opened the tracking app I'd installed on her vehicle 2 days ago. A little blue dot moved north on Route 9, steady as a heartbeat. I gave her 30 minutes, then got in my truck and followed at a distance that wouldn't spook her but wouldn't lose her either. Men who've tracked deer know this patience. You don't rush the shot. You wait for the moment when the target stops moving and the wind is right. Connor had given me the address. Clearwater Inn, room 12, reservation under the name Jessica Porter, her maiden name, the one she'd left behind when she promised to be a Mitchell. The drive took an hour and 10 minutes, longer than her route because I stopped for gas and gave her space to settle in. I parked 3 streets over in a public lot near a hiking trailhead where my truck wouldn't stand out. The Clearwater Inn was one of those places that shows up in travel magazines trying to sell you on rustic charm. Stone facade, rocking chairs on the porch, a sign out front advertising farm-to-table breakfast and free Wi-Fi. I'd looked at it once when planning this trip but went with the cabin instead because Jess said she wanted privacy. Now I understood what kind of privacy she meant. I walked the perimeter slowly, ball cap low, hands in my pockets, just another guy stretching his legs after a drive. Room 12 was on the ground floor, curtains drawn, one light glowing behind them like a secret trying to stay covered. Her SUV sat in the lot, parked next to a silver Audi I recognized from Connor's photos. Garrett's car. Vanity plate that said Apex 1. The kind of guy who thinks branding applies to license plates. I checked my watch. 2:40. She'd texted me at 2:15 saying she'd arrived safe and the place was beautiful. No mention of company. I found a bench near the trail entrance with a sight line to the room and settled in. The sun was warm, the birds were loud, and the world kept turning like it didn't know mine had tilted off its axis. Around 3:30, the door to room 12 opened. Garrett stepped out first, tall and sculpted in the way guys get when the gym is a personality. He wore joggers and a fitted tee, looking around casually like he owned the afternoon. Jessica followed, laughing at something he'd said, wearing the sundress I'd complimented last summer. They walked toward the main lodge, his hand on the small of her back, her head tilted toward him like flowers tilt toward light. I took photos. Not for revenge, for record. Wide shots, close shots, timestamps visible. Every angle clear enough that doubt couldn't find a seat. When they disappeared into the lodge, I stood and walked back to my truck, my legs steadier than they should have been. The anger I'd expected never came. What came instead was clarity, cold and clean as winter air. She'd made her choice. Now I'd make mine. I drove back home with the radio off, just the sound of tires on asphalt and my own breathing. The house felt different when I walked in, emptier but also lighter, like the weight that had been pressing down finally admitted it didn't belong to me. I opened my laptop and started a new folder. Saturday, April 15th, inside it, I uploaded the photos, Connor's full report, the original text screenshot, and the phone records I'd pulled earlier in the week. Then I drafted an email to my lawyer, a guy named Stan who'd handled our wills and the LLC paperwork when Luis and I bought the shop. Subject line, need to discuss options. Body, marriage failing. Need guidance on separation, asset protection, and custody considerations. Evidence attached. I didn't hit send yet. Instead, I sat back and looked at the ceiling, the same ceiling I'd stared at 1,000 nights wondering if we were okay. Now I knew. We weren't okay. We hadn't been for a long time. The difference was I'd been trying to fix it while she'd been planning to leave it. My phone buzzed. A text from Jessica. Wish you were here. Missing you already. The message came with a photo of the inn's porch, rocking chairs empty, sunset starting to color the sky. I stared at it and felt nothing but tired. The kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. I typed back, same. Hopefully done soon. Then I set the phone down and made myself a sandwich I didn't want. The house settled into evening sounds, the fridge humming, the furnace kicking on, the clock in the hallway ticking away seconds that used to mean something different. I thought about Ben, about the conversation that was coming, about how you tell a kid that the people he trusts most couldn't trust each other. That part would hurt. Worse than anything Jessica had done. But it was also the part that mattered most. He deserved a father who didn't lie to himself, who didn't model endurance as the same thing as dignity. Around 8, my phone rang. Jessica, voice light and easy. Hey babe, just wanted to say goodnight. I'm turning in early. In the background, I could hear music, faint and distant, the kind that comes from a room trying to pretend it's empty. Good night, I said. Sleep well. You too. Love you. You too, I said, and hung up before the words could pretend to mean something. I opened my laptop again and this time I hit send on the email to Stan. The whoosh sound felt final, like a door closing on a room I'd been standing in too long. My phone buzzed one more time. A text from Connor. You good? I typed back, getting there. Then I turned off the lights and sat in the dark living room, listening to the house breathe around me. Tomorrow she'd come home with stories about the peaceful cabin and the quiet she'd found. Tomorrow I'd look her in the eye and decide whether to let her keep digging or to hand her the shovel and walk away. Tonight, I just sat with the truth and let it settle into my bones, heavy and solid and finally, mercifully real. The clock ticked. The moon rose. And somewhere north of here, my wife slept next to a man who didn't know her the way I did, didn't know she snored softly when she was really tired, didn't know she cried at dog food commercials, didn't know she was breaking something that had taken 17 years to build. But he'd know soon enough. They both would. Because the foundation doesn't collapse all at once. It cracks, it shifts, and then one morning you wake up and realize the house you thought you lived in was only ever half built. And the man who'd been holding it together finally decided to let go. Sunday morning came with the kind of quiet that feels like the world holding its breath. I woke on the couch where I'd eventually dozed off, neck stiff, phone dead on the coffee table. The house smelled like nothing, no coffee brewing, no breakfast cooking, just the neutral scent of a space waiting for someone to give it purpose. I plugged in my phone and watched it come to life with a string of messages from Jessica. Good morning texts with heart emojis. A photo of coffee on the inn's porch. Another message saying she'd be home around 2 and couldn't wait to see me. Each notification felt like watching someone dig their own grave with a spoon, slow and certain and totally unaware of the depth. I showered and dressed in clothes that felt like armor, jeans and a work shirt, steel toes even though I wasn't going to the shop. Sometimes you need the weight of familiar things to keep you grounded when everything else is shifting. I made eggs I barely tasted and toast that turned to sand in my mouth. The kitchen clock ticked toward noon, each second a small step closer to a conversation I'd rehearsed 100 times in my head but knew would go differently when it actually happened. Stan had emailed back late last night, his message brief and professional. Monday morning, 9 o'clock, his office. Bring everything. I'd already printed the photos, organized the phone records into a binder with tabs and dates, loaded the screenshots onto a thumb drive labeled with today's date. Men who work with their hands know the value of preparation. You don't start a job until your tools are ready and your workspace is clear. This was no different. By 1:30 I was sitting at the kitchen table with the binder open in front of me, reviewing the timeline one more time. 4 months of Tuesdays and Thursdays. Coffee dates that turned into lunches. Lunches that moved to his apartment. Text messages that started careful and grew careless. The accidental message that pulled the thread on a sweater she thought was still intact. At 1:50, I heard her SUV pull into the driveway. The engine cut, the door opened and closed, her footsteps on the walkway distinct as a signature. I closed the binder and set it aside, not hiding it, just giving her space to walk into the room without seeing the gallows immediately. She came through the door with a smile that looked expensive, the kind you wear when you think you got away with something. Overnight bag over her shoulder, hair pulled back, skin glowing with what she'd probably describe as mountain air and what I knew was something else entirely. "Hey you," she said, dropping the bag and coming over to kiss me. I let her, tasting mint gum and the faint bitter edge of lies. "How was it?" I asked, my voice level as a table saw. "Beautiful," she said, moving to the fridge for water. "Quiet, peaceful. Exactly what I needed." She twisted the cap off and drank, her throat working, her eyes on me over the rim of the bottle. "I really wish you could have made it. We would have had such a good time." I nodded slowly, letting the silence stretch until it started to show cracks. "That's funny," I said. "Because I did make it." Her hand paused halfway to setting the bottle down. Something flickered behind her eyes, quick and animal, the look prey gets when it realizes the bush just moved. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trying for casual and landing somewhere near careful. I stood and walked to the counter where I'd left my phone. Unlocked it, pulled up the photos, and set it down in front of her. The first image showed the Clearwater and sign. The second showed her SUV next to the silver Audi. The third showed her and Garrett walking toward the lodge, his hand on her back, her face turned up to his like he was the only light in the room. She stared at the screen, her face draining color like someone pulled a plug. Her mouth opened but nothing came out, just a small sound like air leaking from a tire. "I didn't go to the shop," I said quietly, each word measured and clean. "I followed you. Watched you check in. Watched you spend the afternoon with a man who isn't your husband. Watched you build a weekend on lies while I sat on a bench eating a granola bar and wondering how long you'd been practicing." Her hands started to shake. She set the bottle down before she could drop it, her fingers gripping the counter like it was the only solid thing left. "David, I can explain." "Don't," I said, and the word came out harder than I meant it to. "Don't insult me by pretending there's an explanation that makes this okay." She tried anyway. The words came in a rush, desperate and stumbling. It wasn't what it looked like. Garrett was just a friend. They were talking about her starting a fitness business. The weekend was about planning, not cheating. She'd made a mistake with the text, but it didn't mean what I thought it meant. Each sentence landed like a stone in water, sinking fast and leaving nothing but ripples. I let her talk until she ran out of breath, then I walked to the table and picked up the binder. Set it down in front of her with the weight of a gavel. 4 months, I said. Tuesdays and Thursdays. His apartment on Maple Street. Late night calls that lasted an hour. Hotel charges on our credit card. When you said you were at book club. I've got phone records, bank statements, and a private investigator's report that reads like a schedule. Her face crumpled, the mask finally slipping all the way off. Tears came, real ones, the kind that carry fear instead of sorrow. "How long have you known?" She whispered. "Long enough to be sure. Long enough to document everything. Long enough to realize you weren't planning to come back from this weekend the same person who left." She reached for my hand and I moved it, not cruelly, just definitively. The gap between us felt wider than the kitchen, wider than the years a canyon that had been forming one small lie at a time until it was too wide to cross. "I'm sorry," she said, and the words sounded like they cost her. "I never meant for this to happen." "Nobody means for it to happen," I said. "But you kept choosing it. Every Tuesday. Every Thursday. Every time you looked me in the eye and told me you loved me while his number was still warm in your call log." She wiped her face with the back of her hand, mascara smearing like evidence. "What are you going to do?" The question hung there, heavy with implications. I could see her calculating, trying to figure out if there was a path through this that didn't end with everything breaking. "I've got a meeting with my lawyer tomorrow morning," I said. "We're going to talk about separation, asset division, and custody arrangements for Ben." The name made her flinch. "You can't take Ben from me." "I'm not taking him from you. But I'm not pretending anymore either. He deserves parents who tell the truth, even when it's ugly. Especially when it's ugly." She started to cry harder, the kind of crying that shakes your whole body. Part of me wanted to comfort her, the part that remembered 17 years of muscle memory. But a stronger part knew that comfort now would be just another lie, a band-aid on a wound that needed stitches. I walked past her toward the stairs, needing distance, needing air that didn't taste like her perfume in panic. "Where are you going?" she asked, her voice small. "To pack some things. I'm staying at the shop for a few days. Gives us both space to think." "David, please. Can we just talk about this?" I stopped on the third step and looked back at her, this woman I'd loved since I was 26, who'd promised me forever in a backyard full of white chairs and hope. "We are talking about it," I said. "But talking doesn't undo what's done. It just makes us both have to hear it out loud." I climbed the rest of the stairs and went to our bedroom, the space we'd shared for over a decade, where we'd laughed and fought and made plans that were supposed to include growing old together. I pulled a duffel from the closet and started filling it with clothes, toiletries, the book on the nightstand I'd been halfway through for 3 months. Behind me, I heard her footsteps on the stairs, slower now, hesitant. She appeared in the doorway, arms wrapped around herself like she was cold. "I do love you," she said. "I know that probably doesn't matter right now, but it's true." I zipped the bag and faced her, this stranger wearing my wife's face. "Love isn't a feeling, Jess. It's a choice you make every day. And for 4 months, you chose someone else. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Help me understand how you accidentally fell into bed with another man twice a week for a third of a year." She didn't have an answer for that. The silence filled the space between us, thick and uncomfortable. "I got lost," she said finally. "I felt invisible. Like I was just Ben's mom and your wife and I forgot who I was." I wanted to yell. Wanted to tell her that I'd felt invisible too, working 60-hour weeks to keep the shop afloat, coming home to a wife who smiled but wasn't really there, trying to hold together a family that was already splitting at the seams. But yelling wouldn't change anything. It would just make us both feel worse, and I was already carrying enough weight. "So you went looking for yourself in someone else's apartment," I said quietly. "Instead of talking to me. Instead of counseling. Instead of any of the 100 things married people do when they feel lost." "I know," she whispered. "I know I messed up. Messing up is forgetting to pick up milk. This is demolition." I picked up the duffel and walked past her, down the stairs, through the kitchen where the binder still sat open like evidence at a trial. At the front door I stopped, my hand on the knob, one last thing needing to be said. "Ben comes home tomorrow afternoon. I'll be here. We're going to sit him down together and tell him what's happening. Not the details, but enough so he understands this isn't his fault and both his parents still love him." "Okay," she said from the top of the stairs, her voice breaking. "And Jess? Don't call Garrett tonight. Don't text him. Don't make this worse than it already is." I didn't wait for her answer. I walked out into the late afternoon sun, threw my bag in the truck, and drove toward the shop where Louise had given me a key to the apartment upstairs that we used for storage and the occasional overnight when a job ran late. The drive took 15 minutes but felt longer, every mile putting distance between me and the life I thought I had. When I pulled into the lot, the shop stood quiet and solid, smelling like motor oil and honest work. I climbed the stairs to the apartment, unlocked the door, and dropped my bag on the narrow bed that had seen better days. The space was bare, just a bed, a card table, a mini fridge that hummed like it had thoughts. But it was mine. No lies echoing off the walls. No weight of pretending. I sat on the edge of the bed and finally let myself feel it. Not the anger, not yet. Just the sadness, deep and old and heavy as wet concrete. The sadness of watching something you built with your own hands fall apart because the other builder stopped showing up but kept cashing the checks. My phone buzzed. A text from Luis. "You good?" I typed back, "Been better. Staying upstairs for a bit." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. "Whatever you need, brother. Fridge is stocked. Code to the gate is still 1-9-7-3. I sent back a thumbs up and set the phone on the card table. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the parking lot in shades of orange and red that looked like the world was on fire. I thought about Jessica alone in our house, probably calling her sister or her mother, building a narrative that made her the victim of a husband who didn't understand. I thought about Garrett, probably wondering why his girlfriend hadn't called yet, oblivious to the fact that his easy arrangement had just hit a wall. Mostly I thought about Ben, 12 years old and still believing his parents were a team. Tomorrow that belief would crack, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. The best I could do was make sure the landing was soft, that he knew the crack wasn't his fault, that love doesn't end just because the shape of it changes. I lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling, counting water stains and listening to the building settle. Somewhere in the distance, a train horn blew long and low, carrying freight to places that probably had their own problems, their own cracked foundations and broken promises. Sleep didn't come easy. When it finally did, it was thin and restless, full of dreams where I was trying to fix something that kept breaking in my hands no matter how careful I was. By morning, the sun was already up, indifferent and bright, ready to light up another day whether I was ready for it or not. Monday morning I met Stan in his office at 9 sharp, the binder under my arm and a cup of coffee in my hand that had gone cold on the drive over. His office smelled like old books and furniture polish, the kind of place that had seen 1,000 endings and knew how to sort them into manila folders with labels that made sense. He gestured to the chair across from his desk and I sat, setting the binder down between us like I was laying down evidence at a crime scene. Stan was in his late 50s, gray hair cut military short, glasses that made him look like a disappointed principal. He'd drawn up our wills when Ben was born, handled the business LLC paperwork, and sent us a Christmas card every year with a generic message about wishing us well. Now he opened the binder and started reading with the same expression I imagine surgeons wear when they're deciding where to cut. He went through everything slowly, making notes on a yellow legal pad in handwriting I couldn't read. When he got to the photos, he paused, studied them, then moved on without comment. Lawyers don't waste energy on moral judgments. They deal in facts and what facts can do in a courtroom. After 20 minutes, he closed the binder and looked at me over the top of his glasses. "This is pretty airtight," he said. "Timeline's clear, documentation is solid, and the financial stuff shows a pattern. How do you want to proceed?" "I want out," I said. "Clean as possible. Fair division of assets, joint custody of Ben with a schedule that keeps his life stable. I'm not looking to destroy her. I just want to be done." Stan nodded, writing something down. "She's going to have representation. Probably going to try to negotiate for more than half, especially if she can prove she sacrificed career advancement for childcare. She worked part-time until Ben started middle school," I said. Then she stopped entirely because she said she wanted to focus on the house. "I've been the primary earner for a decade." "Doesn't matter in the eyes of the law," Stan said, not unkindly. "Marriage is a partnership. Contributions aren't just financial." I rubbed my face, feeling the weight of it. "So what are we looking at?" "Best case, 60-40 split in your favor given the infidelity. custody arrangement that gives you primary residence with her having weekend and holiday visitation. Child support determined by income disparity. We file on grounds of adultery, which in this state still matters. It'll take 6 months minimum, maybe longer if she contests. And if she doesn't contest? Then we mediate, draw up an agreement, and a judge signs off. Could be done in 3 months if everyone plays nice. I looked out the window at the parking lot where people were coming and going, living their Monday mornings like the world wasn't rearranging itself. What do I do now? Go home. Sit down with your wife. Tell her you've consulted with counsel and you're filing. Give her a chance to get her own lawyer. Stay civil. Document everything. Do not, under any circumstances, move back into the house or give her any indication that reconciliation is on the table. That muddies the water. I'm telling Ben this afternoon. Stan's expression softened a fraction. Keep it simple. Don't assign blame. Don't use him as a messenger. And for God's sake, don't let him think he has to choose sides. I stood, shook his hand, and walked out into the bright April morning feeling like I'd just signed paperwork to demolish a building I'd spent years constructing. The drive home took too long and not long enough. When I pulled into the driveway, Jessica's SUV was there but the house looked quiet. I let myself in and found her in the living room, sitting on the couch with a cup of tea she wasn't drinking. She looked up when I entered, her eyes red and swollen, face bare of makeup. Ben's at school, she said. I figured we should talk before he gets home. I sat in the chair across from her, the one I always sat in, maintaining the geography of a living room that used to mean something. I met with my lawyer this morning, I said. I'm filing for separation. We'll work out asset division and custody through mediation if you're willing. If not, it goes to court. She closed her eyes, a fresh tear sliding down her cheek. So that's it? 17 years and you're just done? I'm done pretending, I said. There's a difference. We could go to counseling. We could try to fix this. Jess, you didn't just make a mistake. You built a second life. For 4 months, you woke up in our bed, kissed me goodbye, and spent your days with someone else. That's not something counseling fixes. That's something that proves the foundation was already cracked. She set the cup down, her hands shaking. I never wanted to hurt you. Then you should have left before you started sleeping with him. At least then I could have respected your honesty. The words landed hard and I didn't soften them. Sometimes the truth needs edges to cut through the excuses. What do I tell people? She asked, and I almost laughed at the question. Tell them the truth. Tell them whatever you want. I'm not managing your narrative. She nodded slowly, defeated. What are you telling Ben? When he gets home. Together. We sit him down, we tell him we're separating, and we make it clear he's not responsible for fixing us. He's going to ask why. And we'll tell him that sometimes people grow apart. We don't give him details. We don't make him choose. We just let him know that both his parents love him and that's not changing. She wiped her face with a tissue that was already shredded. I really did love you, David. I still do. Then you have a strange way of showing it. I stood, needing to move, needing to do something with my hands. I walked to the kitchen and poured coffee I didn't want, just to have a task. Behind me, I heard her crying softly, and the sound tugged at something old and deep, the part of me that used to fix her sadness, that used to believe I could make everything better if I just worked hard enough. But this wasn't mine to fix. This was hers to carry. At 3:15, the front door opened and Ben walked in, backpack slung over one shoulder, headphones around his neck. He looked at both of us sitting in the living room in the middle of the afternoon and his face did that thing kids' faces do when they know something's wrong. What's going on? He asked, his voice careful. Sit down, buddy, I said, patting the couch. We need to talk to you about something. He sat slowly, his eyes moving between us, already calculating. Jessica reached for his hand but he pulled it back slightly, not in rejection, just in caution. Smart kid. Your mom and I have been having some problems, I started, choosing words like stepping stones across a river. And we've decided that we need to spend some time apart. Ben's face went still. You're getting divorced? We're separating first, Jessica said quickly. It doesn't mean we're giving up. It just means we need space to figure things out. I wanted to correct her, to tell the truth that this was more than space, but Stan's words echoed in my head. Don't assign blame. Keep it simple. What it means for you, I said, is that I'm going to stay somewhere else for a little while. You'll stay here with Mom during the week, and we'll work out a schedule so you and I still get plenty of time together. Is this because of me? Ben asked, his voice cracking in that way 12-year-old voices do when they're trying not to cry. No, I said firmly, leaning forward. Listen to me. This has nothing to do with you. This is between your mom and me. You didn't cause it and you can't fix it. The only job you have is to be a kid and know that both of us love you more than anything. A tear slid down his cheek and he wiped it away angrily. This is so stupid. I know, I said. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry you have to go through this. He stood abruptly, grabbed his backpack, and headed for the stairs. I'm going to my room. Jessica started to follow, but I shook my head. Let him process. We sat in the living room listening to his door close upstairs, the sound final as a period at the end of a sentence nobody wanted to write. That went as well as it could, I said quietly. He hates me, Jessica whispered. He doesn't hate you. He's hurt and confused. Give him time. I stood and grabbed my jacket from the hook by the door. I'll come by tomorrow after school. Take him to get ice cream or something. Let him talk if he wants to. Where are you going? Back to the shop. I'll text you about the mediation schedule once Stan sets it up. She nodded, looking small and lost on the couch that used to hold both of us on movie nights. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered the photos, the lies, the 4 months of choosing someone else, and the sympathy dried up like rain on hot pavement. I walked out, got in my truck, and drove back to the shop where Luis was under the hood of a Dodge Ram that sounded like it was gargling gravel. He looked up when I pulled in, read my face, and didn't ask questions. Just nodded toward the apartment stairs and went back to work. Upstairs, I dropped onto the bed and stared at the ceiling, feeling hollowed out. The hardest part wasn't the divorce or the paperwork or even the weekend that had blown everything open. The hardest part was telling my son that the world he thought was solid had cracks running through the foundation. That night, I lay in the narrow bed listening to the building settle and thought about all the ways a life comes apart. Sometimes it's dramatic, a car crash or a diagnosis or a house fire. Sometimes it's quiet, a series of small choices that add up to a canyon you didn't see forming until you're standing at the edge wondering how you got there. My phone buzzed around 10. A text from Ben. Are you really not coming back? I typed carefully, weighing every word. Not to live there, no. But I'm not going anywhere. I'll always be your dad and I'll always show up when you need me. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Okay. 1 word. But it felt like a rope thrown across the distance. The next few weeks blurred together in a rhythm of work and waiting. I spent days at the shop, losing myself in transmissions and brake jobs and the kind of problems that had solutions you could see. Nights I spent in the apartment upstairs, eating takeout and reviewing documents Stan sent over, signing where he told me to sign, numbering pages that would eventually tell a judge why a marriage needed to end. Jessica hired her own lawyer, a woman named Patricia who had a reputation for fighting hard and charging more. We agreed to mediation, which meant sitting in a conference room with fluorescent lights and cheap coffee while 2 lawyers negotiated the dismantling of 17 years like they were dividing up furniture. She wanted the house. I wanted the shop. She wanted alimony. I wanted primary custody. We met in the middle on most of it, both too tired to fight over every lamp and kitchen chair. The custody schedule gave Ben weekdays with her, weekends with me, and alternating holidays. It wasn't perfect but it was fair, which was more than I expected. Through it all, I saw Ben 3 times a week. Ice cream on Tuesdays, dinner on Thursdays, and full weekends that we spent doing normal things like shooting hoops in the park and watching movies neither of us cared about. He didn't ask many questions about the divorce. Mostly he just existed next to me, solid and quiet, processing in whatever way 12-year-olds process when their world shifts. One Saturday in early May, we were fishing at the lake, neither of us catching anything, when he finally asked the question I had been waiting for. "Did Mom cheat on you?" I set my rod down and looked at him, this kid who was taller every time I saw him, whose voice was deepening and whose face was starting to lose the softness of childhood. "Yeah," I said, because lying would have been worse. "She did." He nodded slowly, staring at the water. "I figured. She's been on the phone a lot. Always steps outside when she answers." "I'm sorry you had to figure that out on your own." "Is that why you left?" "It's part of it. But mostly I left because staying would have meant pretending, and I don't want to teach you that pretending is the same as being strong." He was quiet for a long moment, then reeled in his line and cast it again, the motion smooth and practiced. "I don't hate her," he said. "But I'm mad at her." "That's fair." "Are you mad at her?" I thought about it, really thought about it. I was. Now I'm just tired. And sad that it ended this way. "Do you still love her?" The question hit harder than I expected. "I love who she used to be. Or who I thought she was. But no, I don't love who she is now." He nodded like that made sense, and we fished in silence until the sun started to set and the mosquitoes came out. On the drive home, he asked if he could stay with me an extra night. I called Jessica and she agreed, her voice tight but civil. We were learning how to co-parent, how to navigate the space between married and strangers, how to put Ben first even when everything else felt secondary. That night, he fell asleep on the couch in the apartment while we watched a documentary about World War II planes. I covered him with a blanket and sat in the quiet, grateful for this kid who was handling the wreckage with more grace than either of his parents. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Garrett. We need to talk." I stared at it for a long moment. Then deleted it without responding. There was nothing he had to say that I needed to hear. By June, the mediation was nearly complete. We'd agreed on everything except the final signature, the part where it becomes real and irrevocable. Stan said we were looking at a court date in July for the judge to finalize everything. Until then, we existed in limbo, not married but not divorced, not together but not fully apart. I'd started dating, nothing serious, just coffee with a woman named Rachel who worked at the parts supplier and didn't ask too many questions. It felt strange, sitting across from someone new, learning their laugh and their stories, realizing that life kept moving even when you thought it had stopped. Jessica, from what Ben told me, was still seeing Garrett. They'd gone public, posting photos on social media like they were any other couple. It stung less than I expected. Mostly it just confirmed what I already knew. She'd made her choice long before I found out about it. One evening in late June, I was closing up the shop when Jessica's SUV pulled into the lot. She got out slowly, looking uncertain, and walked over to where I stood by the bay door. "Hey," she said. "Hey." We stood there awkwardly, two people who used to know how to exist in the same space and now didn't. "I wanted to apologize," she said finally. "I know I said it before, but I don't think you heard me. I'm sorry, David. For all of it. For lying, for cheating, for blowing up our family. You deserved better." I looked at her, this woman who'd been my wife, my partner, my best friend before she became a stranger. "I appreciate that," I said. "But an apology doesn't undo it." "I know. I just needed you to hear it." "I heard it." She nodded, tears gathering in her eyes. "Are you happy?" The question surprised me. "I'm getting there." "You?" "No," she said honestly. "But I'm figuring it out." We stood there a moment longer, then she got back in her SUV and drove away. I watched her taillights disappear around the corner and felt something loosen in my chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but release. The weight I'd been carrying since that Wednesday afternoon in April finally had a place to rest. Inside the shop, Luis was wiping down tools, getting ready to lock up. "You good?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "I think I finally am." That night, I slept better than I had in months. The apartment didn't feel temporary anymore. It felt like a starting point, a place where I could begin building something new, something honest, something that didn't require a mask to hold together. The divorce finalized on a Tuesday in July, a hot morning where the air conditioning in the courthouse barely worked and everyone looked tired. Jessica and I signed papers side by side, the lawyers witnessed, the judge stamped, and just like that, 17 years became a legally dissolved partnership. We walked out into the parking lot together one last time. "Take care of yourself," she said. "You too." She drove one direction. I drove another. And somewhere in the middle, we both started becoming people we'd forgotten how to be. People who told the truth, even when it cost everything. People who chose honesty over comfort. People who knew that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let something end so something better can begin. The accidental text had been the match. But the fire had been building for years, fed by small lies and quiet compromises and the slow drift of two people who stopped rowing in the same direction. Now the ashes were cool. And I was finally ready to see what grew in the space they left behind. September rolled in with cooler mornings and the kind of light that makes everything look like a second chance. I'd moved into a small house on the east side, 2 bedrooms with a yard big enough for a grill and a dog I was thinking about getting. Ben had his own room there, decorated the way he wanted it, posters of bands I didn't know and a desk where he did homework on the weekends he stayed with me. Life had settled into a rhythm that felt less like surviving and more like actually living. The shop was busier than ever, word of mouth bringing in customers who appreciated honest work and fair prices. Luis and I had hired another mechanic, a young guy fresh out of tech school who reminded me of myself 20 years ago, hungry and willing to learn. Rachel and I were still seeing each other, taking it slow, both of us carrying enough history to know that rushing never ended well. One Thursday evening in late September, I picked Ben up for our usual dinner. He climbed into the truck looking lighter somehow, shoulders back, the weight of the divorce finally lifting. We drove to the burger place he liked, the one with the milkshakes that were too thick to drink without a spoon. Over burgers and fries, he told me about school, about soccer tryouts, about a girl named Emma who sat next to him in English. Normal kid stuff, the kind of conversation that felt like proof that we'd made it through the worst of it. When we got back to my place, he hesitated at the truck door, that look on his face that meant something was coming. "Mom's moving," he said. "With Garrett. They got an apartment together." I nodded slowly, not surprised but feeling it land anyway. "How do you feel about that?" He shrugged, the universal teenage answer that means everything and nothing. "It's weird. But it's her life, I guess." "Yeah, it is." "Does it bother you?" I thought about it honestly. 6 months ago it would have torn me apart. Now it felt like watching someone else's story unfold, distant and no longer mine to narrate. "No," I said. "Not anymore." He smiled a little, relieved, and headed inside. I sat in the truck for another moment, windows down, listening to crickets and distant traffic, and realized I meant it. The bitterness had burned out somewhere along the way, replaced by something quieter and steadier. October brought the kind of weather that makes you remember why you live where you live. Clear skies, comfortable heat, everything golden and possible. Ben's birthday fell on a Saturday, and for the first time since the separation, Jessica and I coordinated without tension. We threw him a party at my place, invited his friends, grilled hot dogs, and pretended for his sake that we could exist in the same space without the air getting thick. Garrett didn't come, which I appreciated. Jessica and I managed small talk, asked each other polite questions, laughed at the same joke one of Ben's friends told. It wasn't friendship, but it wasn't war either. It was the careful peace of two people who'd learned that their son mattered more than their pride. When the party wound down and the last kid got picked up, Jessica helped me clean up without being asked. We bagged trash and stacked plates in a silence that felt comfortable instead of loaded. "Thank you for today," she said as she gathered her purse. "He needed this." "He did," I agreed. She paused at the door, looking back at the house, at Ben inside showing off something on his phone to a friend who'd stayed late. "I know I said it before, but I really am sorry for how everything happened. You were a good husband. I was the one who broke it." I met her eyes and saw something there I hadn't seen in a long time. Accountability. Not excuses, not justifications, just the plain truth of what she'd done. "I appreciate you saying that. You seem happy," she said. "You deserve to be." "So do you," I said, and meant it. She smiled, small but real, and left. Through the window, I watched her drive away and felt only gratitude that we'd found our way to this, to a place where we could co-parent without casualties, where Ben could love both of us without choosing sides. By November, I'd stopped checking her social media, stopped wondering what she was doing or who she was doing it with. The curiosity had died, replaced by focus on the life I was building, the one that didn't require permission or explanations. Rachel and I had gotten serious enough that she'd met Ben, a casual introduction over pizza that went better than I'd hoped. She didn't try too hard, didn't force connection, just let it happen naturally. Ben liked her, which mattered more than I'd expected. One cold evening in December, almost 8 months after that accidental text had split my world open, I sat on my back porch with a beer and my phone, scrolling through old photos the way you do when you're feeling reflective. Pictures of Jessica and me at the beach, at weddings, at Ben's first birthday. They didn't hurt anymore. They just existed as proof of a chapter that had closed, a version of myself I'd outgrown. I thought about that Wednesday afternoon in the garage, the moment the notification lit up my screen and changed everything. At the time it felt like destruction. Now it felt like demolition, the necessary kind that clears ground for something better. The panic in Jessica's voice when she'd called 5 minutes later, scrambling to contain what couldn't be contained, had been the beginning of the end. But endings, I'd learned, were also beginnings wearing different clothes. My phone buzzed with a text from Ben. "Can I bring Emma to Christmas dinner?" I smiled and typed back, "Of course. Looking forward to meeting her." The holiday was 3 weeks away, and for the first time in almost a year, I was looking forward to it instead of dreading it. I'd invited Luis and his family, Rachel, Ben and his friend, even offered an invitation to Jessica though I knew she'd decline. The house would be full of people, noise, laughter, the kind of chaos that meant life was happening instead of just passing time. Inside, I could hear Rachel moving around the kitchen, humming something I didn't recognize. The smell of cookies drifted through the screen door, sugar and vanilla and the small domestic moments that build a life worth living. I finished my beer and went inside, wrapped my arms around her from behind, and felt grateful for the winding path that had led here. The divorce was final. The wounds were healing. Ben was thriving. And I'd learned the hardest lesson a man can learn, that sometimes the thing you think is ending you is actually setting you free. The accidental text had been a gift, even though it hadn't felt like one at the time. It had shown me the truth when I'd been living in a comfortable lie. It had forced a choice I'd been avoiding. It had hurt like hell and saved my life in the same breath. As I stood in my kitchen with a woman who chose me every day on purpose, with a son who knew his father wouldn't settle for less than honest, with a future that felt open instead of predetermined, I realized something important. The best thing Jessica ever did for me was send that text to the wrong person. Because it led me here, to this moment, to this life, to this version of myself who knew his worth and wouldn't compromise it for comfort. The panic call 5 minutes later had been gold, not because of what she said, but because of what it revealed. And what it revealed set me free. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.